And hello world, it's Lee coming to you live from downtown Boulder, and we've got the beautiful mountains behind us and the sun is setting. And I'm here with Peter Adams from Rockies Venture Club.
Yes,
That's right.
exactly.
Exactly. So Peter, tell us, what is Rockies Venture Club?
So Rockies Venture Club is actually a lot of things. It's been around since 1985, so we're a 33-year-old angel investing group. But we do a lot of things. We're a nonprofit, and our mission is to foster economic development through education and connecting angels and entrepreneurs.
Right.
So we do this with workshops and accelerators and meetings with angels all around the state and around the western U.S.
Right. And so you've come to join us, or the group, from the Startup Catalyst mission tonight for dinner. And you've driven from Denver, I believe.
Yes, exactly.
Which is like 40 minutes, 50 minutes up the road?
It's a beautiful drive. Yeah, it's all good.
And so tell us, Peter, what's your backstory? How did you get into I guess, angel investing?
Yeah, well, I have to say, this is the funnest thing anybody could do. So I started right here in Boulder with a tech company back in the 80s. I exited, and actually I joined the Rockies Venture Club in the early 90s and was an active participant and really got involved with helping companies and moving them along. And then I had kids and dropped out for about 13 years and, took care of kids and did all that, and came back about 6 years ago and took over the organization, changed it dramatically, and have just been having a lot of fun since then.
Right. And so you exited in the 80s.
Yeah.
So what were you doing in the 80s?
Well, it was kind of like a Michael Dell lookalike. Here I was in a university town, starting doing, making computers, and he did a lot better than I did, by the way.
Right.
If you hadn't noticed.
So when you exited, what did you do? Did you just sort of hang around and do nothing?
Well,
or?
I figured I'd learned a lot about finance by, getting this company going, and gotten the MBA and could help companies move along. And so, yeah, it was just helping out in the community.
And it is a thriving community. Like it's amazing.
Yes, but it is so different. I mean, if you look, here we've got Galvanize and all these great people all within blocks of us here. And when I was starting my company, tech company in the 80s in Boulder, all we had was the Chamber of Commerce.
Right.
Bunch of nice guys, but if you want insurance or real estate, but starting a tech company, there was not a startup community here.
Yeah.
And so everybody was on their own. There was no sort of way to get things done. So it's truly different now.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting from an Australian ecosystem perspective. It's fairly immature. It's a fairly immature ecosystem compared to the US, like the likes of, say, Silicon Valley and Boulder. So what's the sort of the couple of things that you think that's really made a difference to this ecosystem that has turned it into what it is?
Yeah, well, there's a bunch of things, and it's not obvious if you just look from the outside. I think of good entrepreneurial ecosystems as being sort of like, farming. You've got to have the fertile soil and nutrients and seeds and water and sunshine and all this good stuff. And so what are those things? Frankly, a lot of it is education. If I look at the people who are successful, they've learned a language of venture capital and structuring a business so that it grows very, very fast and can scale. But it's also sort of cultural. Here, not just in Boulder, but in Colorado in general, people help each other. You can go a block from here and meet with Brad Feld, the biggest VC in town, and, it might take 4 months to get on his calendar, but he will meet with anybody, because he's there to support what people do. He has this whole, give first philosophy, and I think that's the culture here. So that's big, and then all of the rest of this stuff is having the right people and workforce and finances and education. That's the perfect thing.
So when we talk about Give First, we went to Techstars today, and their Wi-Fi access was Give First, and their password was Give First.
There you go. See, it's embedded in the culture. There's probably somebody with a Give First license plate.
But what are we talking about giving? I'll just turn this around. That's better.
I'll stay still.
Yeah, you stay still. So when we say give first, was that give to the community first, or what do we mean by give first?
Well, there's a lot of things. So, like in my case, when I took over Rockies Venture Club, it was kind of rocky. It had been run for a long time and it needed a refreshing. So I basically worked for 2 years without pay, putting my own money in to sort of revitalize this organization. And there was nothing there for that. It was just sort of building something, and it felt good to do that. But I see entrepreneurs do it also when they're coming out, they're starting to look for funding, they're starting a company. They're not sort of thinking, oh, I need help. They're actually coming out, they're volunteering for events, they're coaching their peers.
Standing on the street corner interviewing people.
Standing on the street corner interviewing people, whatever it is. But when they're weak and they don't have the things they need, they are still giving.
Yeah.
It's really impressive to see. So everybody really pitches out in whatever way they can.
Yes, it's certainly, I think Kevin, who we interviewed today, was talking about it's a sort of a bit of a hippie culture that it came from. Is that a fair assessment?
Well, we are in Boulder, but Denver doesn't have so much the hippie culture, and I think it's very strong there as well. Fort Collins is, pretty, separated up, an hour north of here, and same sort of thing, just, really a giving environment.
So where do you think it goes from here? Where does the ecosystem, do you see it growing and getting bigger?
Yeah, so if you look at Colorado, we have the most startups per capita of just about anywhere. Yes, there's more out of the coasts, and they're doing great, but per capita, like Boulder, there's only about 100,000 people here, and it's spewing out startups like you wouldn't believe. Yeah. So what we've got is a need to mobilize capital here, because these guys need funding, and what we're doing is working to syndicate with other angel groups throughout the U.S. and bring out-of-state money into Colorado, as well as recruiting people into becoming investors here in Colorado. And people are afraid of doing this, and it is the most fun and profitable thing you can do. So,
well, it's interesting you say that, because Australia's trying to get that culture of angels going. But what is an angel in from your perspective?
Well, so I know a lot of different types of angels, and they all, of course, are have high net worth, but there's some who've inherited. Most of them have been CEOs of their own businesses and so on. But what's interesting is everybody assumes since angels have all this money, they know how to do this. And angel investing in venture capital is actually quite technical, and understanding how to value a company and understand its potential and pick apart a pitch and look at the exit strategies. Most people don't know how to do that. Well, market opportunity, most people who started a company, they can do that. But some of the other things they can't. So they overvalue companies, or they don't look at exits, they just look at team. Yeah. And team's important, don't get me wrong. But education for angels is probably, if I was starting a new ecosystem, there's lots of things, you can start accelerators and co-working spaces and all of that. But you need to educate the angels also, because if they don't know how to invest in a way that is profitable for them, they're not going to keep doing it. And we got to be looking way down the road to the next deal and the next deal and the next deal. And if somebody does two and loses their money, they're not going to do it anymore. So our job is to make sure that we got great companies who are well prepared to succeed, and then, of course, educate the investors not to make mistakes.
Okay, so what's the key thing that we need to be educating our investors, our angel investors in Australia? What are the couple of the takeouts that you would say?
So, people ask me what the one thing I look for in a deal is, and it's different than what most people say. Most people say it's the team or the market or a great idea. For me, it's the exit. It's the one thing you need to do. And I think in Australia, I'm not sure what the exit environment is, right? So understanding that, and I have this principle called the second customer. So everybody knows, you talk to a consultant, they'll say, who's your customer, right? And startups struggle with that. But my question is, who's your second customer? Not who's going to buy your widget or whatever it is you sell, but who's going to buy your company? And think about that value proposition, because I've seen so many companies who they have great ideas, great products, and I'd buy it, but I wouldn't buy the company. And it's a totally different value proposition. And just thinking about that first is really important, because I can see that some will scale and create unique value for acquirers and others will not. And it's the second of the 7 habits of highly successful people is to begin with the end in mind. And I think that applies to startups as well as to people.
I think that's a very good point to finish on. So think about who your second customer is. What's the exit look like? I see a lot of pitch decks. They say, trade sale or acquisition or whatever, but nothing
that's
specific.
That's not a strategy. That's just what exits are, right? You might as well just say, we're going to buy low, sell high, and then when we're done, we're going to have an exit or with an IPO or an M&A.
Right. So you're actually saying
not saying anything.
Right. So have a look at who's potentially going to be in that market that would want to take you out and buy your company.
Yeah. Look for where the gaps are in the incumbents and where are they suffering, and even more than that, where are they going to be suffering in 5 years? Because that's when you're going to be exiting usually. Right. So you have to be a futurist and know the industry deeply, know who the incumbents are and where they're hurting, and then create something that both will create cash flow, of course, to get you going,
Yep.
and then that will be attractive as an acquisition for them.
Who's your second customer? I love that one, Peter.
customer,
Thank
exactly.
you very much for your time. Appreciate
All right.
it. I'll let
Thank
you
you.
get back up into your dinner and out of this cold.
All right. It's not cold. This is Boulder.
This is
great.
cold, I'm telling you. Thanks, mate. See ya.